Thank you very much for joining us today at Creating Cornerblock. My name is Connor Nolan and I'm from the Birmingham Architectural Association, and we'll be co-chairing tonight's talk alongside Brum Architecture Partner and Delta Light Project Manager Amanda Rushby. We've been collaborating with Delta Light to develop this event, and we look forward to finding out more about one of the city's most ambitious redevelopments by Rob Valentine and the team from Bruntwood. If this is your first time at a BAA event and you're not familiar with us, the Birmingham Architectural Association was founded in 1874, and we relaunched just over 3 years ago. We're represented by architects, architectural technologists, interior designers, engineers, and many more built environment professionals in the local area who have an interest in architecture. We're run by a community of people from a variety of practices based in the city, and our aim is to promote, support, and share knowledge through the community. The BAA is supported by a number of partners and sponsors. I'd just like to say thanks to these organisations who, with their support, we're able to deliver a huge range of events and activities all year round. I'd just like to say thank you to Alamure, Ibstock, Marley, Delta Light, FRA, Taylor Maxwell, Allgood, Armitage Shanks, Milliken, Kitchen Gallery, Altro, and Rainers. We're very lucky to have such great supporters, and it's because of these Brum Architecture supporters that we've been able to continue such a varied programme of events and donate thousands to the Architects Benevolent Society. It's great to work with such brilliant people and organisations, and I'd like to introduce you tonight to my co-chair, Delta Light Project Manager, Amanda Rushby.
Thanks, Connor, and thanks everyone for having myself and Delta Light today. We're really excited to be here. So for anyone who doesn't know the fabulous Cornerblock building, this is located right in central Birmingham, just on Cornwall Street and just literally around the corner from Snow Hill Station. Today, we're going to have a look at how the project actually transformed from Bruntwood Works initially procuring the building, literally right the way through to completion, and looking at how the design actually developed with Glenn Howell's architects. We're also going to touch on the lighting of Cornerblock, as myself and Delta Light were involved in this. We have fabulous guest speakers today, starting off with Sandeep Shambi, who has just been promoted to a partner at Glenn Howell's here in Birmingham. So congratulations, Sandeep. And we're then going to follow on this with a conversation between myself and Sam Soundy. So Sam is our head of UK Lighting Advice Division over at Delta Light and worked with myself on this project. We're then going to complete the speaker section of this event with Rob Valentine. And now Rob is the director of Birmingham for Bruntwood Works and is of course a very important end client. So to finish off, we're going to have quite an extensive question and answer section. So as the talks are going on, please send across any questions that you may have. We're really interested to hear them. There's a little button right at the bottom of the screen if you scroll down, and this will allow you to send questions across to us.
Thank you very much, Amanda. We're now going to hear from Sandeep, who's going to give us a bit more of an insight into Cornerblock and tell us more about his role as the architect on this project. Hi, Sandeep.
Hi, Connor. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us to discuss the creation of Cornerblock. I'm just going to share my screen. We've got a few slides to share. So Cornerblock, for us, a complete transformation of an obsolete office building designed in the 80s, located in the heart of Birmingham's business district. And although we completed this building nearly 3 years ago, some of the themes and the principles we instilled in the building are very relevant in today's debate about the future role of the office and the notion that the office is dead. So I'm sure we'll pick up on some of those themes as we go through the presentation. It was built in the 80s. It was very much of its time, and the detailing was a little bit redundant in the current market. And I guess if we could summarize our intentions from the beginning, they would be to probably re-energize the existing structure, to create a contemporary grade A office space where the customer experience and well-being was at the heart of the building, and that was something that came through from Bruntwood's brief to us right from the outset, that customer focus was absolutely critical. And really, it was to create a very flexible workspace for the future tenants to grow as they needed to. With, we wanted to appeal to small SMEs, but also, large multinationals alike. So it was instilling that flexibility and for businesses to grow with the building. I'm hoping, a lot of you will know about the building, have visited the building, but for those that don't, I think Amanda just mentioned its location is right in the heart of Birmingham's central business district, located very well for public transport networks. It's right on the opposite side of the road from Snow Hill Station and a handful of minutes away from Grand Central Station. So the location was absolutely of paramount importance for the client when investing in this project. But on the doorstep is, as you would expect from a city of Birmingham scale, you've got access to lots of other amenities, cafes, bars, restaurants, public spaces. So its location is second to none. And one of the key drivers for, I think, Brentwood, which Rob, I'm sure, will tell you, was their model was to work with the existing fabric of the building and transform that building and get it out to market as quickly as possible. Whereas it would quite easily have been an option to demolish the building and start from scratch. So originally occupied by KPMG, who had long moved to the recently completed Snow Hill developments. The building, as I said, had become very tired. The detailing and quality of the office space was of its time, and it was actually unoccupied for a number of years. One of the biggest challenges for us was how we gave this building a better street presence and a welcoming entrance. I mean, it wasn't actually that hard because you couldn't get any worse. It was the reception space was elevated about 2.5 meters up that sort of horrid staircase, and then on the left you can see it was dominated by the car parking entrance. Internally, the mirrored glass and a sill height meant that daylighting levels were actually quite poor. But after you scratch the surface away, it was quite a robust building. Concrete frame, and in some areas quite a nice coffered slab. Floor to floor heights were reasonably good, which meant that we could modernize the building, thread in all the sort of infrastructure, the ventilation, the raised access floors that were required, and still maintain a good floor to ceiling height of about 2.6 meters on most of the floors. So, throughout the process, we've been instilling some of those BCO principles. And as I said, as you scratch the surface, we had a good starting point with the frame of the building. Just to summarize, I guess some of the moves that we made from an early stage were to a complete reinvention of the building with a new identity. We gave it a new address in some ways and a new name, a place which would be fit for the modern workplace. We wanted to create, as I said, a proper arrival space at street level and animate that street level so that you didn't have this awkward change in level to get to the reception space. And then, it was to really re-skim the envelope of the building to not only meet standards of thermal performance, but, aesthetically, something that sat comfortably within a conservation area and against some of its newer neighbours. And improve, along with all of that, was to sort of improve the efficiencies, the floor efficiencies of the building, increase the floor space. But again, that customer experience and well-being, create generous shared amenity spaces as well, where workers could cohabit and interact with one another. So just a set of diagrams really that instill that into sort of 4 key principles. The new arrival space, and we've actually relocated the car parking entrance to Livery Street on the left-hand side, so that we look to reduce the ground floor level and create an ambitious sort of volume and entrance space. from Cornwall Street. We looked to replace all of the glazing systems and improve the thermal efficiency of the building with floor to ceiling glazing, strip back some of those sort of dated brickwork details that were inherent in the brickwork, and actually, create additional floor space wherever we could. We ended up creating about an additional 20% of net lettable area. So it went from about just under 90,000 square feet of the existing building to just over 110,000. And we achieved that in a number of different ways. We extended up through the vertical extensions on the roofs. We extended out onto Cornwall Street, and we also infilled some of the courtyard space at level 1. So, this wasn't a quick refurb. This was a total retransformation. There's a series of sort of CGIs that take us through the sort of design process that we had in our minds, and creating this ambitious volume for an entrance hall into the space by removing the car parking and reducing the slab level at ground floor level. We were able to create this ambitious space, a reception where you could meet other tenants of the building. We managed to actually create a designated entrance for the main occupier, and one of the main occupiers on the first floor, which ultimately became Arcadis. But very much trying to create a welcoming space for visitors and for the building users alike. In terms of the facade design, we kept this very, we were going back to basics. Simplicity was the key for us. We looked at numerous options, whether it was a full back to frame solution, how much of the existing facade did we take down. What was very clear was that the glazing system needed total replacement. And actually, by just simplifying the brickwork and the brickwork detailing, the masonry was actually in good shape. So I guess we ended up retaining a lot of the brickwork and making sure that the vertical piers were a very simple language of masonry, and then inserting these sort of large floor to ceiling glazing bay windows that then did so much for us in terms of improving that internal environment, the daylighting and the views. And then, as I said, various extensions were created, but we made a conscious decision to keep the additional floors in quite a bit of a contrast in terms of the language of the building, so that they were almost delicate structures that sat on top of the building, like the crown to some of the building elements. Simplicity was critical. The original building was very fussy in some of its detailing and some of its plans. So, we looked at a lot of bay details, corner details, and some of these show some of the sort of initial quick render test renders that we were preparing. But once you scratched away those funny details, the base of the building gave us a sound sort of canvas to work with. Another rendering showing how some of those corner details, once stripped back, could actually provide quite an adventurous sort of space. The floor to ceiling glazing really did add a level of detail, and because the floor slabs were almost cantilevering away, they created quite a bit of a drama to the space. We did a lot of internal reconfiguration. The image on the left shows how the core and WCs were quite spread out through the center. It's a very simple sort of upside U-shaped plan. But in reconsolidating some of the core area to the left, where we've got a blank facade next to the adjoining building, we were able to sort of free up a lot of that, the facade, the deeper plans of the facade, to allow natural light to penetrate through. But also it allowed us to create a number of different occupancies. So in terms of subdivision, we could then, you could easily let the building out to a single occupier on a floor by floor basis, or we were able to subdivide each floor plan into either 2 or even 3 users. So each floor plan, by the time we've extended outwards, added about 10% of floor space to each plan. And then the key really was to instill as much flexibility as possible. I guess the general interior aesthetic was to really provide a simple palette of materials, a robust and timeless design that would stand the test of time. There was plenty of design moves going on with the exterior of the building, that it was a real conscious decision to keep the interior very light, clean, simple, but really, solid, robust, and very bespoke details. So, for example, we spent a lot of time looking at the lift reveals and how the lift cars would work. The only thing that remains in the same place as the original core is the lift cars. So we used the same lift shafts, but built the core around those lift shafts in a much more efficient way. And the detailing throughout the common areas is quite crisp and it's quite sharp, including the lighting. The lighting was always a sort of subordinate feature, very clean, welcoming, warm light in the common areas, LEDs throughout, but it was very ambient as well in its nature. The customer experience I'll come back to was, as I said, was very key for Bruntwood, and that starts at the entrance, whether you're arriving by foot through the main entrance or whether you're a cyclist and entering through the car park. But there's a very clean sort of split between the front of house reception area and some of those amenity areas which are back of house to the left hand side. And there's a seamless sort of journey that you would go through if you're arriving on bike, for example. There's a general sort of cycle hub in here for about 50 bikes, but I think as the building was completed 3 years ago, I think the client has already upped to the amount of cycle storage, because there's been a real requirement and we've seen a real increase in the demand for cycle storage. Along with that is some really high quality shower areas and lockers, and actually a state-of-the-art gym, which is very well used through early morning, lunchtime, and after work. So that actually you've got the sort of basic principles of all the well-being on site. In addition to that, there was a large roof terrace created on the top of the building, which is a shared roof terrace for all the occupiers. And actually, through the design processes, we actually created more roof terraces for potential occupiers that were taking up space. One of the top floor tenants, we've actually created a rooftop pavilion, which was an addition during the construction process, but it's been designed in a way that we were able to be quite agile and flexible with the design, and link floors together, for example, and just revised sort of the planning consent to allow that to be given consent. And it looks like it's been designed from the off. And then throughout the construction phase, I said, when more and more occupiers were becoming interested in the building, we were able to do simple things that would entice them to come to the building. So I mentioned Arcadis earlier, for example. They took 2 floors. We were able to link 2 floors together on levels 1 and 2, and provide a sort of vertical link for them with a feature staircase, and that also allowed them to have their own entrance from the reception space. So the design was flexible enough for it to evolve, even though it was on site. That's just a bit of a canter through in terms of the process that we've been through, and I'll just finish off with some images of the construction sequence. So here you can see the building being stripped back. You can start to see, back from those blue frames that have been stripped off, the cantilevered floor slabs. You can still see some of those triangular bits that we've ended up cutting back, and you can see some of the extensions going in. This is the main extension, 3 stories. We ended up, it was quite extensive structural works that ended up taking place to not only just to add the steelwork on top, but the steelwork is actually threaded through the building to underpin some elements of it as well. Big challenge to create that volume at ground floor level that I mentioned, in cutting away quite a thick concrete slab. But without that, I think the visitor or the customer experience and entrance level would have been really compromised. So that was a real key driver for us to take that back. And then you can see some of the new high performance glazing systems being installed on site, the image on the left showing just the sort of bracketry and the amount of work that was involved with supporting all of this sort of new facade skin. And then, you know, the completed building, it's something that we're very proud of. In some ways, you wouldn't know that it is an existing building that's been brought back to life, not only from a sustainability point of view and from getting it back to market. I think it's been very successful in various on various fronts. And then just a before and after of the entrance space, how we've been able to create that welcoming entrance, and that idea of a clean, timeless sort of design approach to the interiors that runs all the way through the interior spaces. And yeah, that's it from me, I think, and I'll hand back to Connor.
I know that speaking for both myself and Delta Light, it's really great to see the projects through from conception right the way through to completion. And I know that it was really great to work with Glen Howes as well on it, and kind of to link up and utilise our lighting advice division skills to develop it. So thank you very much for joining us, Sam.
Thank you.
Now, next we have Rob Valentine from Brentwood Works. Rob has a really extensive knowledge of the building. He was involved in everything from the initial procurement of the building right the way through to actually occupying part of it now. So Rob, thank you very much for joining us. I'll now hand over to you.
Thank you, Amanda. Good evening to everybody out there. I understand there's over 100 of us joined tonight, so hi everybody. Great to see numbers over 100. Hope you're all enjoying your evening. I found this actual listening to Sam and Amanda then really quite fascinating, and it just for me underlined the importance of lighting as an extremely important element of design, and sometimes perhaps one that's overlooked. But clearly with Cornerblock we didn't make that mistake, and today when I consider the building, the actual lighting has stood the test of time. It's 3 years old now. It was the right decision to use LED fittings right the way throughout. The lighting still looks really, really sharp, and clearly all the work that Sam put into that design has really enhanced the design that was delivered through Sandeep and his team. So thank you to Sam and Amanda. As I say, kind of just underlines the importance of getting this important element absolutely right. And interesting that we used LED right the way through. I think our first development we've done that, and it was a purposeful part of the brief, because one of the things we were focused on, quite rightly, it was around sustainability. And that can be, if you don't get the lighting strategy right, you can use a lot of power through lighting, and LED technology helps a lot with that. And this was the first commercial building in Birmingham actually to achieve an EPC rating of A, and part of the reason for that was the lighting design that we employed here. Really interesting to listen to Sandeep as well. Sandeep's been on the journey with us for a long time. He's lived and breathed this building. And it was great working with Glen Howes Architects, because from day one, they absolutely got it. I remember our first initial meeting with them, and, they just understood where we were coming from. So it was easy to work with Glen Howes right through the whole process. And we had a lot of fun. There were a lot of challenges, which we'll cover over in a minute, as we developed the building and ultimately let it out. But nonetheless, a great experience, one I personally learned a lot from, and one I'm particularly proud of. What I thought I would do tonight was kind of provide a little bit of the context. Why did we make the choices we made? What we felt we delivered through the journey, why we briefed Glen Howes the way we did, and ultimately, a reflection on where we are today, and a reflection on how successful we believe that the building has been. So, going back in time, I came to Birmingham, some of you will remember, about 12 years ago now, back in the last recession, 2008, 2009. And I came with the purpose to grow our portfolio and grow our presence in Birmingham. And Brunt would do what they do. We do new build. We don't do a whole lot of new build, but what we are really, really great at, I believe, is repurposing redundant, obsolete stock, and quite often that's old office buildings. And when I came to Birmingham, Peat House, or 2 Cornwall Street, was developed for KPMG. When I came, it was completely vacant because KPMG had moved over to 1 Snow Hill, and with the major occupier over there having left 2 Cornwall Street. There was a bit of a journey then. There were a couple of different owners, and ultimately the bank ended up controlling 2 Cornwall Street. And it was always a target of ours to acquire 2 Cornwall Street, and we always had the vision that we would repurpose the building, because we, Bruntwood, and particularly I'm talking about Pete Crowther, a lot of you know Pete, and he was the development director at the time, and I was working with Pete. We both had the vision for 2 Cornwall Street. We felt it had still a part to play in Birmingham's commercial property offer, but it needed vision and it needed investment, and we were prepared to provide both. Anyway, to cut a long story short, the opportunity did come along to acquire 2 Cornwall Street, and we went at it hard. Now, I remember GBR were marketing it on behalf of the bank. Anyway, there were 14 bidders at the time, and it was a pretty well hard fought over. And I remember remember when in that bidding process, looking at our competition, and we were the only ones out of all those 14 bidders that had the view that we wouldn't be dropping this, we'd be repurposing it. So everybody else was coming at it, well, let's level it and let's build something much, much bigger. But for a number of reasons, we felt that wasn't the right thing to do. One, there was a lot of embedded carbon in that building, and purely from a sustainability point of view, it seemed to us the right thing to repurpose it. Secondly, we felt that the existing structure, although there were a lot of problems with this building, which I'll come on to, was sound. There was plenty to work with. And 3, it was about speed to market. So we saw a gap in the market where there would be a dearth of quality product coming through in the Birmingham commercial office market, and we felt that if we hit things well and we got our timing right commercially, this could work out really well for us, and that proved to be the case. In fact, because we knew down the line that Paradise was coming along, and be another Snow Hill and so forth and so on, and we didn't want to necessarily be competing in that market, albeit Cornerblock ultimately is a slightly different offering, and wouldn't have probably competed directly, but it was the right thing to do to develop it quickly, and the best way of doing that was kind of repurposing. But then thinking about the building, I mean, you've all seen the images. It was probably the ugliest building, commercial building in Birmingham. It was pretty awful. As Sandeep said, it was of its time, very early 80s in its style, which and I think we can all agree it wasn't a great period for architecture. You got this kind of cobalt blue, the mirrored glass, this inverted V for motif that was really, really dated, and it was built a lot like a fortress. You got these aggressive steps coming up to the entrance, and next to it you got scissored entrance into the car park, and these really high parapets. It wasn't at all a welcoming building, and we know today, a successful building needs to be a welcoming building. So thinking hard about that part of the brief was we've got to get the arrival experience right. So switching the car parking to Livery Street to free up the frontage along Cornwall Street, and then forming a new slab to create that double height space. Well, that presented a number of challenges, particularly in terms of access to the first floor. It was absolutely the right decision, and fundamentally is the intervention that made the scheme as successful as it is. And I think we can all agree now that that animation that it provides on that corner is far superior to what was there before. And a part of that, and it's something that I'm particularly motivated to do, is thinking outside the building parameter, so outside the curtilage of the building. So we put quite a lot of investment and quite a lot of thought, and working with the City Council to do this, we extended the footways out and completely transformed the public realm outside the building. So if you walk past, and many of you will know it, the quality of pavers and the design as you arrive there is far superior to most of everything you get certainly along Livery Street and along Cornwall Street, and much of the business districts, and it's great now to see the likes of Paradise coming through and equally putting that investment in, because it does make a significant difference. A lot of extensions, as Sandy mentioned. We added an extra 20,000 square foot, and clearly that helped with the commercial returns. But many of those extensions, certainly the front extension, didn't really add a lot of floor area. But what it did do was it dealt with a significant pinch point. So Sandeep talked about delivering flexibility, and for us that was absolutely key. The floor plates as they weren't particularly flexible. You were driven through the core to get from one side to the other. As I said, there was a pinch point at the front. So putting that extension on the front, albeit a limited one, really helped with that pinch point. But the really key bit was the part infill we delivered within the light well, and that then connected the two sides of the floor plate. And as Sandeep said, then together with switching the WC block over to the side, effectively didn't afford any natural light, it provided us some really great floor plates that work both well for single occupancy, but also divvied up well for multi customer occupation, and ultimately that's what we delivered. We've had a number of occupiers, a number of customers have come in and taken full floors, but equally we've been able to be flexible and break up some of the floors without losing any real net internal area. And it's great to have that mix of customers, because that's part of our model. We want to be able to bring customers in, from 1,000 square. Well, we deliver everything from a desk all the way up to full building. So part of that flexibility, part of that ability for customers to come in and start with 1,000 square foot and then grow with us is really important to our long-term model. And then, I guess I remember the discussions going back 5 years ago when we first started talking to Glenn House about what we wanted to deliver. We were then thinking about progressive workspace that met the needs of progressive organisations that were thinking about their people first. So wellness was a real key to the offer here, and we delivered that in two ways. One was getting the bike facilities, shower facilities, and gym facilities in to deliver some really great wellness facilities in that respect. But also the roof garden. Roof garden has never really been delivered in Birmingham, and I remember going down to London and then over to Amsterdam to look at some of the exemplar roof garden schemes that were delivered there, and it seemed clear to us that that's where we needed to go. And without a doubt, it was a major influence in a lot of occupiers, customers' decisions in coming to Cornerblock, having that facility on the roof. And I'm really pleased to say, not so much over this summer for obvious reasons, but in previous summers, that space is booked out most evenings. And when you go up there on a half decent day, it's absolutely packed. And it's been a great selling point for us, but ultimately it was the right decision because people are ultimately using it. And I think that says it all. And ultimately, we ended up, and retrospect's a fine thing. We should probably day one delivered the whole roof as one big roof garden. But there was such demand from customers as they were moving in for additional roof space that we actually had to go back, strengthen the floors below so we could deliver more roof space. And I remember one particular negotiation I was determined to get this in with investor Beazley Insurance, who are first office outside of London in the UK, coming to Birmingham. I was determined that they were going to come to Cornerblock. And part of that sell, part of the reason they came, I think the main reason they came, because we turned around to them and said, well, we'll deliver you your own roof garden. And through that discussion, as Sandeep pointed out, we developed this pavilion. So we had to go back into planning, and I think we developed a really elegant addition to the roof. And Beazley were absolutely made up, because they're an organisation that most definitely put their people first. And they delivered this fantastic pavilion with this fantastic roof space that they utilise extensively, and then the customer finance for business, that they came along, saw the top floor, they wanted it, and thought, oh, some external space would be brilliant for us too, and we delivered them a roof garden. So actually, in the end, we ended up developing that whole of the roof space. Commercially, massive success. I think, I'm not giving too much away when we kind of paid about 10 to 12 million, somewhere in between there. I won't give you the exact figure for acquiring the building. And it was a push at the time. I remember working through the appraisals. We were getting to the top of where we could afford to go. And we had a cost program that was about 14-15 million, and we delivered it around about that figure. And we had an awful lot of success early on. I remember Arcadis, we talked about Arcadis coming in and taking 2 floors. They took the first floor and the floor above, and to help deliver that scheme, we agreed that we would provide vertical connectivity, and we cut out the slab, and we designed a really great fit out for them, again with Glenn Howell's help, and put a feature staircase linking those 2 floors. So commercially, it kind of got traction really quite early on, and we're having a number of negotiations. I remember undertaking the viewings on a building site, always a challenge, but I'm very hands-on when it comes to this thing, and I was involved in every deal in that building, and effectively, I was part of the team that helped let it from the first Arcadis deal all the way through to actually Bruntwood taking the very last bit of space, and we've got a great office in there now. If anybody wants to come along and see it, it's awesome. So commercially, really successful. It's valued over 50 million now. So, that kind of, I suppose it speaks volumes, doesn't it? And I think it's fair to say that all of our customers in that building are really happy in there. Some of them have expanded with us over time. And I expect others will probably leave as they grow, and we're not able to accommodate them, and we'll bring new life in. But we know we've got some fantastic customers, some of whom I've mentioned. We've got Ramboll Finance for Business, existing customers that moved over from McLaren. A real success, and one that I'm very proud of, and I know Bruntwood are very proud of too. I'm just looking for the next Cornerblock personally, so I want to deliver another one of these in Birmingham. I'm actively looking at a few buildings now. We just love 60s, 70s, 80s buildings that we believe, with the right approach can be turned from something that's obsolete to something that's absolutely bang on, which I think Cornerblock is. So yeah, that's all from me. But no doubt there's going to be a number of questions which I'll be happy to answer if I can.
Thank you very much, Rob. Yeah, we've had a number of questions come through. First one is somebody wants to know. This is from Phil Twiss, and he wants to know how many carbon tons was saved by reusing the building compared to a new build, and how much time was saved on the construction program by reusing the existing building compared to doing a new build.
Is that a question for me or Sandy?
I think both.
Yeah. Well, I'll start. Phil, good question. Two good questions, actually. How many carbon tons were saved? I've no idea, but I suspect an awful lot. We never did the calculation, but perhaps we should do that retrospectively, because it is an important point, and one that perhaps sometimes gets ignored. We knew that we would be saving a great deal of carbon. There's a great deal of embedded carbon in that building, as I pointed out. What that equates to, I'm not entirely sure. In terms of the build program, we probably saved ourselves 2 years. And for us, that was quite significant. One, because we value, we appraise our developments on an IRR basis. So the quicker you can get rent coming in, the higher performing the building will be. But two, it was key to get that speed to market, but also have a differential in offer. So if we'd have done a new build, it'd probably been much like everything else that was coming to the market. But with Cornerblock, the floor plates are probably smaller than we would have achieved if we'd have done a knock down and rebuild. And we were able to move forward with a more flexible approach. So we kind of cornered a bit of the market. And for that reason, we were able to really drive the value, but also drive the rent. So we got some pretty good rents in this building, into the 30s. I think we were the first ones to break 31 quid for a good 8-9 years. I know we've now moved into the realms of 37.50, and we're probably going to see rents of 40 quid for not too long. But 3 years ago, that was quite a milestone.
I think with the changes in the current climate and how things have taken a change with COVID, how are you seeing the use of the building nowadays, and how does that impact future developments that you're looking at? If you were to have the brief today and issue it to Glen House, how would it be different to what it was 5 years ago?
That's an extremely good question, and one I've been mulling over the weekend, actually. So knowing this event was coming up, I think as I was discussing earlier, what we wanted to do was bring forward some of the most progressive workspace Birmingham has seen. I think we achieved that. What was progressive 5 years ago or 3 years ago when we started, when we finished the development, is probably not where we would be today. Well, it's definitely not where we'd be today. I'll say that much. But a lot of the decisions we made were the right decisions. We can talk about COVID, but in terms of workspace and its development, I think all COVID will effectively achieve. Well, one of the good things that will come out of COVID is that acceleration in the development of progressive workspace. So workspace that is based around people effectively. And ultimately, that's what good workspace needs to be about. So thinking about what that might look like in the future, and if I was briefing Glen House today, some of the fundamental changes I'd probably say to Glen House, we don't want any car parking. So we're not going to have any car parking. Sorry. So we're not going to have any car parking, and I would have given over more space to cycle facilities, but I'd be putting charging points in for that cycle facilities. I'd also be thinking about scooters and how we accommodate them, and charging points for scooters. And on the back of that, we'd need to increase the shower, locker, drying facilities, all of those things that make cycling and ultimately scootering to work, which I think is going to come, a good choice for individuals. But also the wellness facilities, I'd be looking at and saying to Glen House that we need to put in some classrooms in. Have a program of running virtual classes, those kinds of things, and that's something we're most definitely doing in our buildings now. As I said, I would say to Glen House, let's do the whole roof as one big roof garden, and let's really go to town on this and putting and then thinking really carefully about the biophilia. One thing that I'd like to have done, and probably and I'm exploring at the moment, is maybe could we get some beehives incorporated into the scheme. And then the arrival experience, although we made the right choices at the time, as you come in now and I look at that linear desk, I'm thinking, is that where we need to be? And I'd probably move to more of a kind of host type meet and greet, so less of a linear desk, which is quite formal, and go to something that was a lot more informal. And within that space, that space of probably trying to create some kind of dwell space. We've got a coffee station in there, but maybe we would have pinched a bit more space off the corner and then put an actual coffee shop in that would link in. And I think, if you look at the Colmore building, they've done that very successfully. I really like that about the Colmore building in terms of that. So I'd probably be looking at that. And then the look of the internal space. I remember back 5 years ago having this debate. We ended up we were cowards really. We ended up putting a grid ceiling in, and I think ultimately that was not the right decision. But we were kind of on the cusp, and actually, if you look behind that metal pan ceiling and you look at the concrete soffit, it's cofferted. Really quite interesting. And I think for our lighting designers that are here today, I think that would have been a really great challenge for them. So that's those some of the interventions I think we'd be looking to do. Other than that, the flexibility, the re-emphasis around wellness, the meet and greet changing a little bit, not too much. I guess thinking about COVID and what demands are going to be going forward, certainly thinking about less touch points, so call waiting for the list perhaps, technology, temperature technology potentially. All these kinds of things are going to come to the fore, and I think will probably form part of our briefs going forward. And then connectivity, thinking about 5G that's coming forward. 5G is very, very high frequency. Therefore, it doesn't penetrate buildings particularly well, doesn't penetrate through glass particularly well. So anybody who relies on a desk phone anymore, I don't bother with a desk phone. I'm sure most of the audience here don't. But if you don't get if we're not careful, we don't get the technology right in the building to provide that linkages through to the 5G networks, and that we could be getting a lot of blind spots in buildings. So I'll be thinking very carefully about that, because I think that's increasingly important. And we all know how much we're now relying on digital connectivity to communicate, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So yeah, hopefully those are the kinds of things I'd be looking at. Quite an extensive answer to your question, Connor, but I hope you and the audience found that interesting.
Thanks, Rob. Probably a question for Sandeep here, actually. We've had a question coming from Ian Cameron, and he has asked whether the vertical extension was always in your vision for the building, or were you actually limited by how much additional space you could actually develop?
Both really. Yes, I think the intention was always to build a number of extensions. Buildings of that era in the 80s, it was a concrete frame, which we knew early on. There was going to be some scope to add some additional floor space. We were lucky in some ways. We were able to add 3 floors in certain areas, and so we really tested the sort of limits of what we could do within the existing structure. And I mentioned earlier that we ended up actually threading new steelwork through the building to prop up some of those extensions right the way down through the basement, which then sacrificed some parking. But it was always the intention, yes.
Brilliant. We've got a really interesting question as to you've created this beautiful rooftop garden, and what people want to know is what it would take to incentivize other developers to re-green the city and do the same with their schemes. I mean, it'd be good to hear from both yourself, Sandeep. You work on a number of schemes around the country.
Yeah.
You must have had this conversation countless times. What would it take? What to incentivize developers to do this?
Well, Russ, it's a no-brainer, really. Every building that we develop, there's a roof space. Okay, there's going to be a cost associated with getting access to it, but for us, it's such a lost opportunity not to make use of that space. Certainly in commercial buildings, residential buildings, where we know we've got to provide amenity areas for residents or workers. In terms of what is needed from an incentive point of view, I think hopefully, you know, listening to Rob talking about how great a commercial success Cornerblock's been and how busy that terrace is, it's not something you maybe rentalise on a commercial building, but I think it attracts the right occupiers to the buildings. It's another way of, you know, you can use that space if you're an occupier as another informal meeting area. You see, if you're there during the day, you'll see people working out there. There's loads of events happen on that roof terrace. It's just a nice place to be in. Especially we know about health and well-being, access to outdoor spaces. No one wants to be stuck indoors all day long every day. I think going forward, the regime of different workspaces is going to be far more important than just, you know, hot desking or agile working from home. It's having different environments to work in.
Thanks for that, Sandeep. And I know that you've mentioned there, Rob, that you have been looking with Bruntwood Works at different buildings to maybe go to next. One question that we've had come in is which parts of Birmingham do we actually see as having potential growth opportunities? Are there any particular hotspots that you've seen?
Crikey, that's a good question as well. Yeah, I mean, what we'll see is an expanding core. You know, despite the difficulties that we're all experiencing at the moment, you know, we'll overcome them. And I've already talked about accelerating trends. And one of those trends is that kind of that move out of London for a lot of organisations, where they're looking to move. It's sometimes referred to as North Shoring, but you know, organisations thinking, well, we're a bit too dependent on London. It's proving quite difficult for us in terms of recruitment, in terms of affordability, in terms of retaining staff as well, all of those things, and importantly, livability, what I call livability. So I think the medium to long term prospects for Birmingham as a commercial destination for investors is a really good one. So we've got to be creating, in order to fulfill that potential, we've got to be creating some really great workspaces, which we're doing. And it's great to see the likes of 103 Colmore Road coming out the ground. I was looking at that building only on Monday and thinking what a fantastic skill it is, but also the stuff at Paradise. And I know Glenn Howes are working on some of that. Yeah. So we'll see a continued development towards the west side of the city. But to contrast with that, I think Digbeth offers an awful lot of potential, particularly when we get some certainty around High Speed 2 and when we deliver the interchange there. I know Hammerson are looking very carefully, and I think again Glenn Howes looking at this at Martineau Galleries. We're definitely going to see significant development taking place down there. So anything around a transport hub always works for me. So you know, I think some exciting times ahead. For us at Bruntwood, you know, you'd have probably seen the announcement around the Life Sciences Park. So we're going to see development take place over there, and that's key to our economic success as a city. A real shift, a real gear change as we move into kind of life sciences in partnership with the university, but also the innovation districts. We acquired Innovation Birmingham. Could that be 3 years ago now as well? And we have a vision to deliver a whole new innovation district in that part of the city, working with Aston University and BCU, but also Birmingham City Council. So yeah, I guess you know, I'd like to do some stuff in the Jewellery Quarter myself, but I think residential values probably preclude the ability to do that to a degree. And we're gonna, you know, I'm quite focused around repurposing you know, obsolete commercial office buildings. There's still plenty of those about, but also quite interestingly, and a big debate I know, you know, around the high street at the moment is, you know, what we're going to do with inevitably a lot of the shops that we're going to be getting back, the likes of Debenhams. What's the big question mark over what happens with the space that John Lewis aren't going back into? So maybe some opportunities there as well.
We've got another question that's just come through. So Becky Smith, the Reba Regional Director, wants to know if this was this a BIM project, and if it was, how did the collaborative approach to design produce positive results? Who wants to take this one?
It wasn't at that time, actually. Most of our projects going through now are, but like I said, this was going back probably 5 years, and so we didn't deliver it through BIM. We did the sort of traditional coordination, exchange of drawings, models, 3D models, etc.
Yeah. But we probably, if you know, again, probably a learning point. But yeah, if we were doing it again today, we'd definitely do it through BIM. And all the advantages.
Guys.
Thanks ever so much, everybody, for joining us today. We've had loads of questions come in, but I think we're about out of time, really. Everybody wants to go off for their dinners. So thank you very, very much for joining us. And from myself and everyone at Delta Light, you know, it's been a real pleasure to join the event. And, you know, it's great to go over such a fantastic project that we were involved in. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you, Sam. I hope you enjoyed yourselves, and thanks everyone for joining us today to find out more about Cornerblock. Next week we'll be back, and as part of our Brum Architecture Resilience series, we're going to be hearing from Stride Clown's chairman David Hunter. So do tune in next Tuesday. If anyone's got any other questions they want to send through, please do send them across, and we'll look to get in as many published online after the event. Thank you very much for joining us again, everyone, and thank you for taking part. Take care, and we'll see you at the next one. Bye, guys.
Thank you.